I am a professor of games, and I've been a professor for a week and a half, and that makes me so happy. This is my inaugural lecture as well, which is fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to sort of start off with a little bit of a kind of introduction about me and what I do, because I think that's important to kind of why I do this talk quite a lot. I also want to say something else. Yes, this group is predominantly white, probably heterosexual males, but you know what? It's also not full of those people. And also, I'm going to make a massive assumption here and assume you're not racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobes. And if you are, that's like not so good, guys. But like,
and girls.
Yeah, and girls. So gender neutral guys. Okay. So actually, despite the fact that yes, the industry is quite heavily skewed at the moment, that doesn't mean that the people in it are not like becoming aware of these issues and also want to change them. So what I've tried to do is try to be more positive than negative in what I'm going to say, because I think that's really important. So I'm going to talk about some goods, I'm going to talk about there were some rage moments yesterday when I was putting this together. But also, like, you know, I think, as I said, it's something that this is kind of, it's a really important issue, but it is an issue that people are aware of. Like, it's not like we're not deliberately excluding people. So, there's going to be a lot of bending. I'm really glad that I'm wearing this dress. Games that are for everybody. And the board gaming community, we're at an advantage because we are not the video gaming community, which, as a lot of you know, has had a lot of problems with this recently. Saying that on Twitter got me the usual kind of threats that you might expect that happened. It was that, right? Games are for everybody, everyone should be able to enjoy them, everyone should be able to play them. It doesn't necessarily mean that we all want to play the same games. I'm not a big Eurogame fan. That's okay. I don't have to play them. So this is me. I'm Esther. I got made into a video game character, which is also with me wearing my Portal t-shirt. As you might expect for an academic, I write a lot of books, I do a lot of research, but I'm also really deeply embedded in the video games and board gaming community, and this is me at LongCon, which is a big convention, 2014, with Steve Jackson. Yes, the other Steve Jackson, okay, not the other Steve Jackson. He turned up and he helped us make games. It was incredible. He's a really nice guy. I run a lot of events where I try and bring academics and lay people, I guess, together. This is another photo from LongCon. I really like this photo. The reason I like it is I've tried to run a games jam with academics, teaching them how to make board games and games, with people like the Lewisham role-playing Haven, teaching them actually how to make games. And in this kind of photo, you can see there's a bunch of people at the front. They're the role-play Haven guys. They're kind of working out what to do. They're kind of plotting how they're going to teach. There's Michael Botterill at the back. He's a man in black from Steve Jackson Games, so a volunteer who's turned up to teach games out of the bottom of his heart. And then in the back, we have some really confused academics trying to work out how to make games, which was one of the most terrifying things that they did. They found it completely, you know, they're used to sort of sitting and being clever, and suddenly they find that they're trying to do something that they know nothing about. I'm also really heavily involved in organising and running conventions and running the games area in those conventions. I've just come back from Kansas City in America, where I mentored the guy who was running the games area, which is kind of what this was in London. 400 people, again we had all the demo teams, all the usual stuff that you kind of expect, but in a place where they don't usually have that much games, where it's still that room of guys playing rather than a big kind of open area. And I also do other kind of writing. I won an award for lots of writing, and this large man gave me this rather wonderful award this year. Some of you might know who he is. But what I want to talk to you about today is representation. Okay, so there's some kind of obvious things that we know that we should avoid. And the first one is this, and I'm going to use Arkham as kind of my big example. It's like, this is the witch from the Arkham series, the Arkham horror series. And like, this is actually quite a sexy photo. She looks like Louise Brooks. That's kind of cool. I quite like Louise Brooks. But of course, the moment that they make that into a painted figure, this happens, and you actually have this like, well, how's she going to cast spells doing that? You know. So that's our kind of like. So this is this kind of like stereotypical, like don't make accidental mistakes when you're trying to make somebody look sexy. And as I say, I actually quite like this character. And I want to talk about these two guys, because these two guys, you may recognise them. Anyone know what they're called? Okay, these are two of the characters from Arkham Horror and now subsequently Mansions of Madness. This is Tits McGee and that's Hooters McBooby. That is actually what we call them and have done for years. This character is, I think, Amanda. She's the librarian. She's dressed up in her underwear. And this is Jenny Barnes. She's the dilettante. There's some really good cosplays of her. And again, it's like... One of the interesting things about Mansions of Madness, who's played the new version? Yeah, a couple of people. They've changed the characters. They've actually, because they got a lot of flack about their characters, sort of saying, like, why is this woman in a librarian? Why are the women kind of sexy? And this image isn't going to show. But one of the things that they've actually done is change both Jenny and Amanda to be just as cool, just as hot, but they've put some clothes on them. So it's kind of like, yeah, you can do these characters and they're still the same people. It's still these guys that we recognise and want to play with. But you know, they've been, someone has had a bit of a think about them. Arkham also kind of got into trouble for having quite a lot of racial stereotypes. So they had like the voodoo woman, they had the jazz musician, and they had the singer, and again, like the powers that they had were kind of keyed to that. So the singer had an extra hand actually, which is a bit weird. But you know, like the guys had kind of physical powers about their sort of strength and their prowess, and the women had thinking powers. And it's a kind of predominant trend. So the first point I wanted to make in this was that it's cool to create characters, and we're constantly kind of looking at the characters that we create and putting them together. But sexy doesn't have to mean naked. Like, I like sexy characters in my games. I like usually playing the women. Actually, in Eldritch Horror, I like playing Charlie because of the Charlie's Angels jokes. That's very funny. And I wanted to use this as an example. This is Ash's Rise of the Phoenix Born. Has anybody played it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a kind of like, it's a drafting, deck building game. So it's not drafting, but it's pretty cool, and I kind of like it. But I like it most because I like these guys. These are kind of the base characters, there's a couple more. And they're really mixed. So we've got this character in the middle, she's kind of the spellcaster, and she's a female character, and she's black. She's also English. So she's not like an African black woman, she's an English, and she's a lady, like she's aristocracy. We've got these kind of guys here, you know, sort of quite traditional guys. We've got this gender-neutral character here, and this character remains gender-neutral throughout the whole game. Doesn't make any difference. Like, nothing's kind of drawn to that. They just are. And then we've got this dude on the end, and I've got to say, I love this guy because he is hot. I also don't think he's straight. Like, I mean, just look at him. Then they started releasing their new characters, and they released again like sexy guy. Like, this is a character that I'd want to play. I kind of want to look at all the different art with him. He's interestingly mixed, and he does kind of normal stuff. And again, attention isn't drawn to the fact that he's of a different race. I'm drawing attention to it. And again, we kind of go back to this guy, and I do really think this guy is really cool because he's camp as fuck, and that's great. So sexy doesn't also mean just guys, and it's very, very, very easy to develop your characters with the kind of male gaze in mind, and it happens a lot, and it's a shame. And again, kind of back to this character, as I've kind of said, like she's a lady, she's gentry, so they've just inverted that thing. One of the things that's really interesting about games is that often people will say, but historical accuracy. You're making a game. It doesn't have to be historically accurate. Just because everybody was white back then doesn't mean that they have to be now. Doesn't mean that everybody who is upper class has to look a certain way. And I think this is a really cool example of this. This is the woman who did the art for Dead of Winter, by the way, who again has messed around in really interesting ways with the characters. And somebody pointed out to me, the old guy in that, the old guy and the old woman, is not the old crone who's wise. It's the drunk Santa. So the old guy's this drunken old dude, and it's just cool. He's a cool character. And then kind of like final picture of the Ashes guy. So to kind of round off this point, don't do this. This is super easy. So first of all, we have only 2 female characters, and they are both reserve characters, right? They are the healer girlfriend, oh god, please no, and the sorceress, who is kind of super hot and sexy, who stands at the back and casts spells. When I play board games as a character in character-driven games, I love tanking. I love being a tank character, which means I've kind of got to pick this dude, or again, this dude, very kind of stereotypical white guys are at the front. Lazy Asians. Not all Asians do kung fu. Not all Asians are mystic guys. Again, it's a really quick one. It's really easy to fall into that, just because people recognise it. But it doesn't always have to be the case. And I thought this was a really cool example, actually, because like it's one of those horrible memes about like the fake gamer girl. So like, don't encourage that stereotype, guys. This is also another really bad example of the fake gamer girl. This is Night on Earth. Who's played Night on Earth? Yeah. It's okay.
Last night on Earth.
Hmm?
Last night on Earth.
Last Night on Earth. Sorry, yeah, my mistake. I hate this game, and the reason that I hate this game is because of this and the other female characters. They are so off-putting. Yes, I get that it's a joke about teen flicks with zombies in it. Literally what this character does, again we've got another Hooters McBooby here, is she follows the other characters around and heals. How boring is that? I do like sometimes playing support characters that if they're standing in another square, they can cast a healing spell, but it's literally the only thing that she can do. And it's literally like, oh, well, we've got some girl characters, and like, girls like games, right? And we've put them in. SDCC, I got it wrong to the person I said earlier, so I apologise. SDCC this year had 49% male, 49% female, and 2% non-binary attendees. So they've hit parity for people attending comics conventions. We should not be doing this to put off that vast amount of people that we see at Expo playing. Because the other thing is, if you're designing a game that includes bad gender stereotypes, you're stopping people from spending money, because those people are, I'm not going to buy this game. And you know, I've just become a professor, I've got quite a lot of money to spend on games, it's amazing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have to spend this month and this that. Another one which has kind of happened quite a lot is, I love Katniss. I don't want to have to play her all the time. Not all girls have bows. And yeah, I know, right? I love Tomb Raider, I love Rihanna's writing. So just think about what you're doing. And I just wanted to, who did this? I love you and I want to kiss you. This is just awesome. Oh God, no. Disease. This is just awesome because, again, like somebody has had a bit of a think about characters here. They're nicely mixed. Yes, they're all skewed female, that's fine. But, you know, different body shapes, different heights, that's kind of cool. Different races. They look interesting, they're the kind of people that I'd want to play, and I'd be thinking, oh my god, I don't have to choose like just 2 characters. It's also a mistake to think that like all women just want to play the female characters, because as I say, like I don't. I like playing lots of different ones. Dead of Winter, I like playing the neurotic mayor, and like he's gained his own personality through, again, really good flavour text on those cards, in the same way that unfortunately Hooters and Tits, less so. You know, they've become what they are on those pictures. People do think about that, they do talk about that. And the perfect example of that is Matt Leacock's games. I have a confession, my crush on Matt Leacock is epic. He is unfortunately extremely married, so damn it. But he's done 2 really cool things with his characters. The first thing is that the characters don't fall into those classic healer, fighter, rogue, bandit, whatever. He's just changed the character names and abilities. And then he's mixed them up. You know, again, the support characters, sometimes they're female, sometimes they're not. The major characters, again, the starter characters that you usually say to people, you know what, the scientist is a pretty easy character to play, the researcher's kind of easy, and the medic, they're just different people, they're just kind of different roles, different people, so you're kind of thinking in an alternative way. Yes, players do recognise those tropes. They do recognise the strong character, the weak character, the healy character, but they don't kind of have to be like that. So kind of enough about gender and diversity in that respect, and onto some kind of other things. So one of the things that I did yesterday, because I kind of got to this point and I thought, you know what, I'm like really banging my drum here and it's kind of a bit reductive, was first of all I thought about some positives, but also I did what all lazy academics do, which is ask Facebook. I said to Facebook, okay, I'm doing a presentation on diversity. Give me some examples of things that you think are really important that I should tell. Like, what's your one take home? 3/4 of an hour later and 200 posts later, I was like, okay, I'm running out of slides. So the first good example was this one. I know I've mentioned this to a couple of people. Why is Ticket to Ride really good in terms of diversity? Anybody? Yeah.
Colourblind.
Colourblind, yes. What are the two things that it does that are really cool in terms of colourblindness?
Symbols and colour.
Symbols and
Shapes.
colour.
And the shape of the...
Shapes and trains,
Yeah.
yes. Really simple. And you know what the other nerd thing I have is trains. So again, I want to play this game because not only is different pictures, different colours, but also like the trains are different. It's really simple, really early. I do like Beyond Baker Street, but I was playing it with somebody the other day who said, you know what, I can't distinguish the colours particularly well. The other colour is blue. So again, they've gone for the symbols thing. They've made the numbers really clear, and in this case, also good for left hand, right hand, because you can switch. It's also good when you accidentally put your cards down and fan them out the wrong way. Here is Tiny Epic Kingdoms, a good game. Really bad on so many levels in terms of kind of components, bits, things that look the same, colours, numbers. You're really, the kind of sensory overload on it is a real problem, and so it's a shame because it's a good old game. It has particularly odd meeples. It's got steeples that are meant to look like steak. I just like to kind of make the meeples sound like different things. And it's also got bananiples, which apparently are meant to be corn. But again, kind of tough to see, and I know games with components are cool, but kind of watch it on that, because people with small fingers. My mum, obviously, got to mention my mum. The thing that my mum said, so my mum has multiple sclerosis, which means that she can't actually grasp things particularly well. And she just said, flat bases. I do also know that some of the things that I'm saying, it's cost. It's easy to make square pieces than pieces that are different shapes. It's easy to use components that already exist. A lot of these things add cost to what you're doing, so I do kind of appreciate that in terms of design, but all kind of stuff that you can think about. This is also a font issue. Like, I found this really difficult to read because there are so many different things. Some dyslexic people can't see different colours particularly well on different colours. So I used to have a friend that used to have to put like a red screen over everything. And again, your sort of white on black is a really dodgy one. Like, I find it makes my eyes go funny when I'm looking at it. So just to kind of go through some of the things that people said. Person with visual difficulties, loads and loads of board state that it's impossible for me to see. They were actually talking about code names. So interestingly, the code names is now done the pictographic version. And actually found like the sort of words dizzying, which I was quite like, ooh, okay. Love this one. If you're designing a family game, make it so the 8-year-old can do the game setup. That's really cool. Like, I would have never have thought of that. Oh yeah, it's a game for the family, so your daughter should be able to like put it together. Avoid race lock to colour. Rampage, I'm looking at you. Again, in Rampage, the blondes are women, equals. Businessmen are businessmen, and then there's kind of Asian figures. They're not the yellow ones, thank God, but that does sometimes happen. I know that there are also games where that happens really specifically, where you're, again, meant to be drawn, the kind of attention is meant to be drawn towards the race. I'm trying to remember the name of the game where you have the indentured servants, you have the slaves in it, and the whole point, one of the points of the game is to kind of like, shit, we're dealing with the slave trade. Just because you're sitting down doesn't mean it's not difficult to play, so this kind of idea of like reaching for stuff and kind of thinking about like how big is your map or your board going to be, and also how do you kind of move things. some things this applies to and some things this doesn't. But that was kind of an interesting one. Shadow's Brimstone, Flying Frog, gives alternate, I love this, like, again, but it's a cost, right? Alternate gender heroes, one on each side of the cards, and alternative sculpt models. So you can just flip and choose the one that you want. Okay, when writing, use gender-neutral pronouns. A friend of mine said use male and female. I'd suggest using they. Turns out I was right because Matt Leacock answered the post and said use they. So the master has spoken, guys. But he said, you know, I know it's the flavour of the month, but use they because if you're reading, it is really off-putting to read he does that. And then Becky from Eclectic jumped in and she said, like, again, when you use an example of play, it's really cool to just use different names. And Pandemic the Cure does that. Like, the group example is a group of 3 different people who, you know, are playing the game and is a male, female, and other, and I can't remember, and other, maybe a they. My diversity one would also say use they and gender-specific pronouns. That's kind of a bit of a one. I know that the Firefly role-playing game specifically has a section that explains why Z is being used as a pronoun, which is a pronoun that some people like. Don't speak in gamer talk is explain the rules as if the person hasn't played anything before and avoid slang. Like, that's just a good rules thing. But also, barriers to entry come in all kind of shapes and forms. I ran a session about getting people into games, and I deliberately put some kids on it. We had some older people on it. I had somebody with visual impairment, and they all kind of talking about stuff that they liked. And all of them said, it's really easy for us as gamers to write in-game slang. I was saying to you earlier, like, I was demoing at Expo, and I kept saying to people, this is a drafting game. And then we'd get to the drafting phase, and I'd be like, draft! And they hadn't had the courage to say, we don't know what it was. And I was really surprised how few people, you know, how many people didn't know what a drafter was. But again, we get stuck in our own language, and so the more that we can kind of break that down, the better. Some games have glossaries if they're really big, and that's kind of cool as well. Yeah, historical accuracy is a rubbish excuse for a lack of diversity in anything except miniatures wargame. That was pretty strong. Avoid sexist rules. So, you know what? If I have to play another game where the woman has like less strength, I will scream. That's incredibly offensive, and it's really irritating as well. Again, similarly, sort of just think about how you're kind of putting that together. Have as many female characters as male. I know that people are kind of working towards that. Draw different body types, age of characters. Dead of Winter is amazing. Avoid iconography. Somebody told me a really interesting story about this because people then started talking about Galaxy Trucker and Cosmic Encounter, which went back to the colourblindness thing. Apparently, one of the reasons that one of the early versions of Cosmic Encounter was developed, and the developer was really super happy with it, and everyone else was like, why is everything purple? And that's how he discovered that he was colourblind, because it looked fine to him. But it's like a gradation as well, so it's like dark, light, you know. And interestingly, colourblindness is something that only affects males, so like if you're going to go for your like really easy diversity, you can get that one straight away. Think of people who might be reading in a different language. Again, it kind of just goes back to trying to make your rules clear, which hasn't got much to do with diversity. That's kind of like an obvious one. So, to conclude, avoid lazy stereotypes. So avoid the race, sex and gender, and just kind of think. And again, if you've explained your characters well, you don't have to use those